विरासती न्यूज़ में आपका स्वागत है। मैं हूं नासिर अली। राहुल गांधी कैम्ब्रिज यूनिवर्सिटी में एक लेक्चर देने गए थे, जहां पर उन्होंने अपने इम्प्रेशन के लिए कुछ इररिलेवेंट स्टोरीज सुनाई। ऐसी इररिलेवेंट स्टोरीज जिनसे देश की छवि खराब होती है। जैसा कि उन्होंने कहा कि कश्मीर एक इंसर्जेंसी प्रोन एरिया है और एक वायलेंट प्लेस है, और भारत जोड़ो यात्रा के दौरान उनसे कहा गया था कि वहां पैदल ना चले, नहीं तो उन पर ग्रेनेड फेंके जा सकते हैं। मगर वो 140 लोगों के हमरा आगे चले, और जहां पर उनको बताया गया था कि सिर्फ 2000 लोग ही होंगे, वहां पर 40,000 लोग झंडा लेकर पहुंच चुके थे। जहां पर राहुल ने उन लोगों को यह सुनाया कि पुलिस और सिक्योरिटी सिस्टम गॉट ओवरलोडेड एंड कोलैप्स्ड, यू कैन सी पैनिक ऑन देयर फेसेस। एक सीनियर लीडर जो कि एक नेशनल पार्टी का प्रधान है और प्राइम मिनिस्टरशिप का एस्पायरेंट भी है, उससे इस कदर इमेच्योर बात की उम्मीद ना की जा सकती है कि वो उन रियलिटी से बरक्स पिक्चर वहां पर सुनाए, जबकि असल में वैली के हालात में काफ़ी इम्प्रूवमेंट हुई है। वो पत्थरबाजी का दौर खत्म हो चुका है और ना ही मुतवातर बंद की काले दी जाती है। राहुल गांधी ने कुछ रिलेवेंट बातें की, जैसे कि ये सुनाना कि 2 लड़कियों ने इसका हाथ पकड़ा और सुनाया कि इनके साथ गैंग रेप हुआ है। जब पुलिस एक्शन की बात हुई तो उन्होंने मना किया कि हम अपने भाई को सुनाने के लिए आए हैं, जबकि एक सीनियर लीडर होने के नाते इसको बड़े वक्त एक्शन लेना चाहिए था। इसी तरह से राहुल गांधी ने उनको ये सुनाया कि जब मैं चल रहा था, वन गाय लुक्ड एट मी एंड आस्क्ड टू कॉल मी, को बुलाया। सिक्योरिटी ने मना किया, पर वो जब मेरे पास आया उसने बोला कि मिस्टर गांधी, क्या आप सच में हमारी हेल्प के लिए आए हैं? हाँ हाँ। तो इसने बोला, उधर देखिए, ये जो उधर खड़े हैं ये मिलिटेंट है। सील वीडियो में देखी जा सकती है। पर हैरानी की बात यह है कि इतना सीनियर लीडर होने के बावजूद राहुल गांधी एक दूसरे देश में जाकर अपने देश की इमेज खराब करने के लिए और ये दिखाने के लिए कि कश्मीर के हालात खराब है, ऐसी स्टोरी सुनाई, जो कि असल में मुमकिन ना हो सकती है कि इतनी सिक्योरिटी होने के बावजूद मिलिटेंट वहां तक कैसे पहुंचे। इस कदर की बयानबाजी इमेच्योरिटी दिखाती है। जबकि इसके कंट्रास्ट में हमारे जो प्रधानमंत्री जब भी किसी दौरे पर किसी मुल्क जाते हैं, अपने देश की डेवलपमेंट के बारे में बताते हैं, जिससे कि देश की छवि बुलंद होती है, देश का नाम भी ऊंचा होता है। मजीद तफसील देखिए इस रिपोर्ट में।
Okay, I got to cruise through this thing, right? I'd get up in the morning. I mean, you can imagine it. You have knee pain, and you're like, okay, so how many kilometers do I got to go? 3,500. I mean, how do you even come to terms with that, right? You're like, my God, right? So this is, as I was dealing with this, I started to sort of go silent, right? And so I would speak to somebody. It would be as if I was like a dark lake. I'd just be sitting there in silently, and the person would be speaking to me. And slowly I started to feel many things that I could not feel before, right? So for example, a farmer would come, he'd grab my hand, and immediately when I grabbed his hand, I could tell the suffering that he's been through, the pain that he's been through, the difficulty he's been through. So you started to hear, not just with your ears, you start to hear with your hands, you start to hear, listen with your eyes, you started to look, you're walking with somebody and you can see that he's struggling. So you start to get a sense of what this person is and where he's coming from. Very, very deep sense of that. I'll give you the most shocking example of this. And I said that these discussions started becoming very personal. So we're walking and suddenly these two, and how you can hear in an individual, right, the voice of millions of people, right? That's what, as a politician, I think about. How do I take what you're saying and say, okay, how do I now take it from there to what a million ladies are saying, or million women are saying, or what you're feeling, how do I translate it to what a million or 500,000 women are saying? So I'm walking, and suddenly these two girls come. One of them grabs my hand on this side, and the other one grabs my hand on this side. And when they grab my hand, I feel something I've never felt before, right, in the hand. I'm like, this is strange. The way they're holding my hand, there's something strange in it, right? It's like almost like a desperate way of holding my hand. So I look at the girl and I say, tell me, what's happened? How are you doing? And she looks at me and she says, well, my sister and me, that's the sister, were gang raped by 5 guys. So this is not a personal conversation that you have with somebody you've just met. So I'm like, look, let's call the cops. Right? That's my first reaction. I'm like, that's a real problem. Let's call the cops. And they're like, no, please don't call the cops. You can't call the cops. So why can't I call the cops? And they're like, well, if you call the cops, we'll be shamed. And then the girl says, and I'll never be able to get married. So I said, what do you want me to do? They don't call the cops. So I was like, okay, so but then what do I do? If I don't call the cops, how do I help you? They're like, no. We just wanted our brother to know what has happened to us. And I said, yeah, you've told your brother what's happened to you, but now what do I do? And there's nothing you can do. And then they walked away. Right? So now you extrapolate that, and you can see thousands of women who have faced something like that, and you can see the pain that is there hidden. You can see the difficulty that they're dealing with. The other thing they said, the other thing I thought when they walked away, I was like, my God, so these girls have dealt with this, and now they're going to deal with it for the rest of their life, and they're never going to tell anybody. Right? And I thought, that's crazy. But that's it. Right? So these are the type of things that started to happen. And they started to change. As a politician, the way I look at people and the way I think about people and the way I react to people, right? Almost like a silence in me. There is just, okay, say what you have to say and I'm quiet. And there's nothing I'm going to say. And tell me everything you have to say, right? And then once you've told me, I'm not telling anybody, right? Which is trust. So that's what this yatra started to do, and it started to happen with kids. I'm walking I'm walking, and just to give you a flavor of India, I'm walking, and there are these little beggars who come, little kids, and they come and they hug me and stuff. So I'm fooling around with them, and another man comes and says, "Don't do that." So don't do what? He's like, "Don't touch them." I said, "Why?" He says, "They're dirty." So I said, "No, you and me are dirtier than them." Right? So you can see then these ideas that are floating around that suddenly you never heard them before. You never heard, or you didn't get the granularity of it anyway. And then can we go to the next? Yeah. So that's a Sikh mechanic. You can see his hand there, and this is a girl whose house has been broken. Whose house I think has been smashed. Anyway, next. Now this is where the thing gets really interesting. So we are going through all the states, and Kashmir is a state which is insurgency prone. Right? There's a lot of violence. There's been quite a lot of violence for many years. In fact, that picture there is me putting flowers on the spot where almost 40 soldiers were killed by a car bomb some years back. So we arrive in Kashmir, and Kashmir is this so-called violent place. And as I'm entering Kashmir, the security guys come to me and say, "Listen, we need to talk to you." So what do you need to say? And they say, "Well, look, the thing is, you can't walk in Kashmir, right? It's not a good idea. We're walking 3 days, and we're walking 3 days in the roughest districts. So you can't walk in Kashmir. It's a bad idea." So I'm like, "Why can't I walk in Kashmir?" And they're like, "Well, because you'll get hand grenades thrown on you." So now I'm responsible for 120 people I'm walking with, right? So I'm like, "Look, let me go and have a little word with them." And so I go and have a little word with them and say, "Look, they're telling us they're going to get hand grenades thrown at us." And they're like, "Okay." And I was like, frankly, I want to walk. I mean, if we get hand grenades, we get hand grenades. So they're like, "Yeah, we should all walk." And so we decided we're going to walk. And we start to walk. And suddenly what starts to happen is these Indian flags start coming everywhere, right? Everywhere, they just start coming out, right? The first day we're told about 2,000 people are going to show up, and 40,000 people show up, right? And that thing over there, where I'm sitting on that jeep, is because the police and security system just been overloaded, and it's collapsed, right? Because they just can't manage the crowd. And if you look carefully, you'll see the panic on the security people's faces. Anyway, they pull us out of that and say, this just doesn't work. We can't go through this in this manner. And then the next day they set it up properly, and then we go through. That's us entering Kashmir where the mountains are. That's on the first day. And then the really interesting thing happens. So we've been told we're going to be killed. We're walking, and people are coming, and then one guy looks at me and he says, call me. So I'm like, come. And the security people have said, listen, please don't do this. Please don't call people. Like, we walk here, don't call people, because this is putting everybody at risk. So the guy says, call me. I say, come. So he comes, starts walking next to me. And he says, Mr. Gandhi, you've come here to listen to us. So I'm like, yes. So he's like, that's interesting. He's like, you really come here to listen to us? And I'm like, yes. So he's like, good. And then he says, you see those guys over there? And we're walking. And he says, you see those guys over there? And I'm like, yes, who? He's like, those boys over there. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, the militants. Right? Now, militants should normally kill me. In that environment, militants should kill me. And he says, they're there. And they're looking at you. So I look at them, and they give me this sort of, I'm serious, they give me this sort of look. And I'm like, okay, I'm now in trouble, right? Because this guy's just told me this. They give me this look, and I give them this look back. And then we carry on, nothing happens, right? And why I'm telling you this is because they actually couldn't do anything. They actually didn't have the power to do anything, even if they wanted to. Because I had come into that environment listening. And I had come into that environment completely with no violence in me at all. And the vast number of people there were seeing that. Right? So that to me was an indicator of the power of listening and nonviolence. Now, what did we hear in India?